I'm especially pleased to be by the choice of the theme, Caminemos con Jesús, which beautifully reflects the rich, fruitful, and ever-evolving journey of Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church. Now, as I begin, one of the things I need to say is that I was still putting my presentation together today after several months of doing a lot of research. I had so much fun. And I go look for a picture and end up finding 100 pictures, or not finding a picture and trying to contact 100 people, see if somebody had a picture. But just reading and researching and talking with people, and I had a great team that helped me put this together. But let's sort of start at the beginning. And the beginning with Latino Hispanic Ministry, one of the things I try to remind people in the church is that we're not just the U.S. I try to encourage people not to talk about national church or national positions. We are an international church, and we go back, as way back. So even though initially Latino ministry in Latin America did not begin with the indigenous peoples of those lands, nonetheless, ministered the Anglican Church, the Episcopal Church, the Society for the I always forget this right. Propagation of the gospel were out there in Latin America. And so we began in 1639. Yeah, okay. So in 1639, one of the first church was built in Honduras, in the Rotan Emmanuel Church. In Belize and Honduras became a missionary diocese in 1978. In the 1830s and 1840s, expat churches were established in Costa Rica, and then 1834, the same thing in Venezuela. In 1866, however, the first Spanish-speaking congregation in the U.S. was established, Iglesia de Santiago, in New York City, which was mostly Cuban. And in 1892, Puerto Rico, first church was established there in Most Holy Trinity in Ponce. And in the Dominican Republic, it was a teacher, Benjamin Isaac Wilson, who began the first ministry in the Dominican Republic, followed by two Marine Corps folks, and then in 1940 it became a missionary diocese. Colombia was connected to Panama, and there was a district of Panama, missionary district of Panama. And in 1964, Province 9 was created. And that consisted of, back then, Mexico, Central America except for Belize, and then Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela was not a part of that, Dominican Republic, and Cuba. Cuba was not a part of the Episcopal Church in 1964. So, but Province 9 was huge, but it was not established as a separate province until 1964. Now, in 1967, something happened that isn't specifically about Latino Hispanic ministry, but I think it really influenced it. I think it's really important for us to talk about it, and that is the General Convention Special Program. So in 1967, General Convention Special Program, I believe, was the impetus and greatly affected Latino Hispanic ministry in terms of how it started. How many of you remember the Special Convention, the General Convention Special Program? Okay, a few of you. It's really worth studying about. So I'm going to read to you just a little brief about that. At the 1967 General Convention in Seattle, Washington, Presiding Bishop John Hines called on the Episcopal Church to take its place humbly and boldly alongside of and in support of the dispossessed and oppressed peoples of this country for the healing of our national life. In response to Heinz's leadership, the General Convention adopted a $9 million fund and set up a special program at General Convention. GCSP was given top priority for the church's use of personnel, time, and money for the years between 68 and 70. In November of 67, following the General Convention, Bishop Hines, in consultation with the elected members of the Executive Council, set up a special staff unit of the Council to carry out this GCSP. Hines named Leon Modeste, an Episcopal layman, to direct the program and administer the funds. Some grants were made to organizations outside the Episcopal Church, some of which were perceived by some Episcopalians as supporters of violence. By 69, some Episcopal clergy and laity were calling for the end of the General Convention Special Program. Over the next few years, opposition to the General Convention Special Program continued to grow, and restrictions were placed on the recipients of grants. At the 73 General Convention, it was decided to place all minority organizations of the Episcopal Church under one funding program, and the name of GCSP was changed to the Commission on Community Action and Human Development. Now, that General Convention Special Program set aside monies for the ethnic, what became known as the ethnic desks. And the direction was that those desks were to find partners in the country to help alleviate poverty and all the things associated with that. And so the ministry, the Latino Hispanic Ministry, began as just like the indigenous, just like the African descent ministries, not so much the Asian, was dealing with people that were poor. That was the sort of mandate. So, as a result of that, the Reverend Jorge Juan Rivera, Puerto Rican, was appointed as the Hispanic officer of Executive Council. He was given an incredible, if you read and I hope that you'll use the archives as an incredible resource. I spent so much time and a lot of fun reading all these reports, ENS reports, and General Convention action and resolutions of Executive Council on the archives. The Juan Jorge and helped to establish the National Commission on Hispanic Affairs. And their charter, which was approved by Executive Council, laid out how they were going to sort of eradicate poverty, how they were going to help Hispanics in terms of education, in terms of access to to food, to housing, and all those kinds of things. And so monies that they were given were not used to plant churches or to raise up leaders. The money was used to support other community organizations that were serving the poor Hispanics in the country. In 73 at General Convention, boy, it's raining, the Hispanic desk was established. In fact, all of the desks were established in 1973. And at that same time, Juan Jorge decided to go back to parish ministry, and Maria Cueto became the new Hispanic officer. Now, I need to tell you about Maria Cueto because her time at convention was a really sort of sad and dark time in the life of the church. How many of you have heard of Maria Cueto? Oh, good overview. Maria Cueto was an amazing laywoman, and the only layperson that's held this position at the church. In the mid-70s, Cueto was staff director of the National Hispanic Commission and employed at the Episcopal Church in New York. She was highly regarded in that work and throughout a subsequent 9-year ordeal that included 2 prison sentences for refusing, as a matter of conscience, to testify before a grand jury amid an FBI probe alleging links between the commission members and the FALN, the Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, a violent faction of the Puerto Rican independence movement. Cueto, who was 33 at the time, and her secretary were subpoenaed in the case in 1977, as were Presiding Bishop John Allen and another church executive who cooperated in the investigation. After refusing to testify before the grand jury, Cueto and her secretary, Raisa Nemikin, served 10 months in prison, but were released when a federal judge found no reason to connect them with the FALN. The FBI, however, continued to pursue Cueto, who with 4 others, including Episcopal Church Publishing Company board member Stephen Guerra, again refused to testify before the grand jury. At the time, the FBI alleged that the 5 represented the remaining leadership of the FALN, a charge the defendants denied. Despite character references provided by 4 leading Episcopal bishops, Cueto, together with Guerra and the 3 other defendants, were convicted of criminal contempt of court and served 25 months of a 3-year sentence in federal prison. Now, as soon as she was called in about the grand jury, she was dismissed. She was put on leave of absence, and Executive Council took about 8 months before they determined some sort of leave of absence pay, and I believe that the decision was that over all those years of prison, that she would be given 4 months of pay. And then during that time, I'm coming back here, the Reverend Herbert Aronategui was appointed as the 3rd Hispanic officer. Now, Bishop Allen was the person that was the presiding bishop at the time, and so you can imagine being the presiding bishop and dealing with this kind of a scandal, especially at that time, historically, and appointing the next Hispanic officer had to be somebody that the presiding bishop felt would be safe, right? So Herbert Aronategui was called in, and Herbert served for 22 years. He was someone that personally I had a lot of struggles with because of his very cautious leadership. Nonetheless, he did provide a lot of resources to the church, primarily in the area of reports and studies. He hired organizations. He hired Justo Gonzalez, a historian, to do a lot of research about the state of Hispanics in the country and about the potential for ministry. And it was under Herbert's leadership, and it actually had begun with Maria Cueto, to begin to plant churches and to raise the question about leadership, theological education, Christian formation, and all of the other things that go along with congregations. And it was during Herbert's time that one of the first things that was done was that a magazine was started called Avante, and we searched everywhere and we can't find anything written about Avante other than it started. And So we couldn't find a picture, we couldn't find a sample of it. Hopefully, maybe, I didn't call archives to see if they have it. But Avante did happen, and I don't know how long it lasted. Now in 79, I just wanted to point out that in 1979, there was an article about how Hispanic ministry grants were given to 18 different dioceses for a total of $78,000. So by 79, churches in the diocese of Pennsylvania and Newark and San Joaquin and Connecticut, in New York and Louisiana, Chicago, Southeast Florida, New York, and let's see what else. We're Pennsylvania, and then some of the provinces were receiving money to plant churches or to develop various ministries. In 1980, under Herbert's leadership, the provisional hymnal was printed in Spanish. This is all English hymnody translated into Spanish. In 82, by then the 79 prayer book had been translated. Took a few years, and it was printed in 82. The funds were provided by the Bible and Common Prayer Book Society for that translation. In 85, interpretation was offered, simultaneous interpretation was offered for the first time at General Convention by volunteers. At one point, if you can imagine, General Convention was about 10 or 11 days back then. And there were like 4 interpreters nonstop, and towards the end they were just exhausted, and so they were looking for volunteers. Nobody would volunteer, and somebody threw me into the booth, and I couldn't translate the second word. And so I'm standing there bubbling and saying, they're talking about, I what's like moving to something else, and it's like, get me out of here. So I probably was in there for about 15 minutes. In 1989, there was an announcement that a new hymnal was ready, which became the El Himnario, but the hymnal was not printed in 1990 because the announcement was made about a hymnal that did not exist. Funds had been provided, work had been done, but we didn't have a hymnal, and the El Himnario did not get printed until 1990 something. I think it was 1996. I think 1996. Because by then a new committee was put together, more funding was provided, and the El Himnario was finally printed. In 1992, there was a gathering of Episcopalians at Camp Allen, and called the Congreso. Now, there had been many different meetings over these decades, but the Congreso was came about because of, by then, a very large number of congregations, a lot of congregations, and a lot of very involved laity and clergy who insisted that we needed a nationwide gathering of Latino leaders. And so, and the call from the ground was that we wanted to get organized. Now, remember that Herbert was very cautious and played things, really carefully. There were 3 attempts historically to organize Latinos. The 3 attempts were in, give me a second, 1985, there was the Coalition of Hispanic Episcopalians. So this is before the 1992 conference. 1992, after that conference, the National Hispanic Organization of Episcopalians, in Spanish, Organización Hispano Nacional de Episcopales, referred to as ONE. And then in 2009, the Coalition of Episcopal Latinos, called SED. So in 1992, a very large gathering of Episcopalians gathered at Camp Allen, and people went there with a lot of ideas, a lot of energy to organize us into something similar to be a force to be dealt with, a force that was going to speak and be organized at General Convention, that was going to advocate for the ministry, that was going to look for funding, etc. However, unbeknownst to the people that were there, Herbert had used his cadre of his little group that he that worked with him, and they had written the bylaws of an organization, and so during the conference, this is not recorded anywhere that I could find, but from hearsay and conversation that I had, I did not go to that conference. But the consensus is that they were given the understanding that they were going to be talking about how they were going to get organized. And they did have a lot of conversation about it, but when the time came, one of the members of Herbert's council presented these bylaws and said, by the way, we've got this structure all kind of laid out for you, and sort of offered it to the people, at which point it kind of exploded, and people left extremely angry and hurt because of the deception. Nonetheless, the organization was started. All three attempts lasted between 2 to 3 years and then fizzled. And most of it was just for lack of support, lack of funding, perhaps, and I was not involved in any of them, but perhaps just lack of organization and structure. But I think always there was a lot of energy and desire, to be recognized and to have something to say, we're just like, everybody else in the church, but it just didn't happen. In 1985, the El Informador was created as a quarterly magazine, and and when I was at Seminary of the Southwest, I thought I organized the first Encuentro de Seminaristas Latinos, and I just found out today that I did not. In 1986, there was a gathering of seminarians in Dallas, Texas. I stumbled across that today and was extremely surprised because I had written to Herbert in 1988 to say, I'm at Seminary of the Southwest and there's only one Latino here, and I have a strong need to meet with other Latino seminarians. And is there any way that you can help me, make that happen? And he wrote back and said, there's no need for that, and there's no money for that. So I fortunately had a faculty person at the seminary, Frank Sugeno, who got some funding from the deans, and we held an encuentro. But 3 years before, there was a gathering in Dallas of Latino seminarians, and they even organized themselves, and they called themselves Semilla. 3 years later, I'm in seminary, I've never heard of Semilla, so I don't know what happened to Semilla or how long it lasted. We organized ourselves as El Colectivo de Seminaristas Latinos, and that lasted about 2 years. So I already mentioned the ONE, which came out in 1992, and I would say by 1996 or so, you never heard about it anymore. And this is really annoying, and I'm sorry, but I don't have anything to do with it. In 1995, Mexico received its autonomy as a separate province of the Anglican Communion. And in 1997, IARCA was born. IARCA is the Iglesia Anglicana de la Región de Centroamérica, which includes Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, and Costa Rica, who was not a part of TEC, joining them as well. And in 1998, El Himnario was 1998. Okay, so in 1989, it was announced that a Spanish hymnal was going to be printed, and it didn't come about until 1998. And that year also, Albricias was published as well. And in 1999, Reverend Daniel Caballero was appointed as the interim Hispanic missioner, and first time the word missioner was used, and then in 2000 he became the missioner. In 2001, we had a really important moment when 6 bishops met in Atlanta. It was Monday of Easter week. They met with Daniel Caballero had gathered them together, and it was 6 bishops, Daniel Caballero and Isaías Rodriguez, who's in this room. They met and wrote a very important document. It was a call to, we need a plan, we need we need a strategy, we need resources, we need to raise up vocations. It was a really strongly worded plea for please take us serious. However, there was a flaw in how it all sort of, what happened as a result of this. What was written was well written, it was well articulated. However, what became known as the Atlanta Manifesto was really a letter to presiding Bishop Frank Griswold. The plan was that 3 bishops would take the letter to the bishop and sit down with him and sort of make the demands and see what came of it. Now, y'all know our polity and our structure, and there's only so much that can happen, sort of in that direction. The presiding bishop, however, that letter was delivered prior to that scheduled meeting. So Bishop Griswold got the letter from one of those bishops before the scheduled appointment. The scheduled appointment was canceled after they discovered that, because sort of the surprise element had been sort of lost. The presiding bishop never responded to that letter. Nothing was ever done with that letter, other than the fact that the Atlanta Manifesto was printed and distributed so that all of us could see it. And we felt pretty proud of our bishops for having spoken, but that was about it. And I learned about it in 2002. So in 2001, we also began, under Daniel's leadership, remember we had the El Informador, we now had Caminos, it's a new quarterly magazine. And about this time, Daniel gathered some leaders together across the church to plan the second Encuentro Nacional, as it was called. And the theme of it was Un Nuevo Amanecer, which later became the name of that gathering. So the second Encuentro Nacional Nuevo Amanecer was held in Los Angeles. At that point, we heard about the Atlanta Manifesto. It was distributed to us, and we were shocked and angry about how it had not received the attention that we had hoped. In 2004, Lesser Feasts and Fasts was translated and published. And in 2005, I was appointed as the Latino missionary for the church. And at that time, I was, I need to say that when I met John Hines in 1974, I was studying at General Seminary, and I walked into A15, walked into the lobby. Back then, as a young boy, I was 20. I was very impressed with this mural that was that mosaic that's above the lobby, for those of you who have been there. And I thought to myself, someday I'd love to work here. And so I actually prayed, stupidly perhaps, that God would give me the opportunity to serve in this position. And so in 2005, I was called to serve as the missionary. And one of the first things I did in January of 2006, I started in November 2005. In 2006, I held a gathering at Virginia Seminary called Visión y Homenaje. The Visión part was, I need help in creating a vision for this ministry and for this office. And the homenaje was to honor Daniel Caballero for his leadership. Because in 5 years, he did amazing work. He created the resources that we had been begging for many years under Herbert. Isaias Rodriguez, he's laughing here in front of me, wrote many resources that were distributed across the church under Daniel's leadership. And in fact, Isaias was the editor along with Victor Ruiz, who edited Caminos. Out of that Visión y Homenaje, I also selected a small group of 6 to serve as my council advice, and we met a few months later. And that's the picture on the left, far right. I call that the second council advice because the first council was one that Daniel had gathered before that I served on. In 2006, we had a gathering at Canuga called Moviendo Montañas. Now, one of the things that I feel really proud about is the way that we, I would say through my leadership and my personality, but also just because of so many people that I was meeting and all the incredible gifts that were emerging, Canuga sort of saw our potential and contacted me and said, we'd like to sponsor a Hispanic gathering, and you name it, whatever you want to do it on, we'll provide some funding. And so we held Moviendo Montañas, and the focus of it was to gather Latino musicians from across the church to see, because I had heard and knew that one of the resources that we needed was, I need to go back and say that El Himnario was a real flop. It was printed by Church Publishing. When I began in 2005, they still had lots of stock of El Himnario because it had just not been, didn't have a very wide distribution. And one of the main reasons, and one of the things that many of us have spoken to the committee that was working on El Himnario, was that we needed a words-only hymnal. It was printed with music. Most of our Latino folks do not read music, and so it just was not user-friendly. Although the contents of it, nothing wrong with it, well, it was also disappointing that there wasn't much popular music in it, but aside from that, it just wasn't very user-friendly, and it was expensive. We gathered together, and from that, a committee was established that we held in 2007 in Los Angeles, and that group began a cancionero project with the intent to publish a words-only, affordable, user-friendly songbook for the church. Our plan was that it would take us about 2 years to do that. The cancionero committee, executive committee, is in this room, and to this date, They are still working on the Cancionero, and it's had a few setbacks, but the committee is very persistent, and we are perhaps, and Gary Cox, who's in the back of the room, and John Rawlinson, who's in the back of the room. John was part, and Gary were part of the very first meeting, and Gary was at the Moviendo Montañas, as is Lori Zant, who's in the back also, who's leading this group. So Gary has been a part of this project for close to 18 years. So really faithful people working on a project. And during the course, discovered that even though the original plan was to create a Spanish songbook for the church, and we've always insisted on calling it a cancionero, a songbook, and not a hymnal. A hymnal requires, General Convention approval, and this was just a resource out of my office, and we had no funding, and at that time, things were different in the church, and the Standing Commission of Liturgy and Music wasn't really interested, and they'd already dealt with El Himnario, and so we just decided to do an office, church center resource, and now, the project continues. But my hope and prayer is that one of these days we will all be singing from the Cancionero, which has been named Cancionero Nuevo Amanecer. Nuevo Amanecer means new dawn. In 2007, 2008, 2009 were really busy years. I just arrived. I visited about 30 or 40 dioceses that were involved in Latiné Ministry, because I wanted to find out who was out there and what the needs were and what kind of gifts we had. It was a really fruitful experience, and I kept hearing about all the needs that we had, so we tried to respond to that as quickly as possible. And we created something called the Instituto de Capacitación para Clérigos, ICC, and Academia para Laicos Episcopales that we nicknamed Andale. And we had that in the diocese, so it's clergy and lay people, week-long, intensive formation program that we held in Bogota, we held in Quito, we held in the Dominican Republic, we held it at BTS, we held it at CDSP. And so here's a couple of the pictures of those gatherings. In 2008, we had Nuevo Amanecer in Peachtree City, Georgia. And that was, and then in 2009, we presented the strategic vision for reaching Latino Hispanics, and that was adopted by General Convention. Now, 2009 was an important year, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. And then in 2009, for the first time, there was a Spanish section. In fact, I've got it right here. A little show and tell. Pretty proud of this. And Luisa had something to do with this. By 2009, the church had finally sort of recognized that we mattered. For those of you who've been at General Convention, way back, there used to be a newspaper referred to as the Daily, and that had been printed forever. In 2009, the Daily was in English, and it was bilingual. We had a section called Perspectivas Latinas, and then there was a section for the ECW. And this was the first and last time that there was something like that, because by 2002, everything had gone digital. There are some samples of some of the prospective Latinas, and one of Luisa's children is featured in there. A lot of really great pictures. So if you want to pass that around, show and tell. And I'm aware of time. Trying to wrap this up here. In 2010, Nuevo Amanecer moved to Canuga, and we've been there ever since. So we've had Nuevo Amanecer in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018. We did not have it in 2020 because of COVID. We went back in 2022 and 2024. Similarly, in the Southwest, started something called Nuevos Horizontes, which happened on odd number of years between Nuevo Amanecer for a few years. That was led by Al Rodriguez. In 2014, we also began something called the New Camino, which was a weekend for dioceses. We still hold these, where we come into a diocese upon invitation to share, to help dispel myths about who Latinos are and to encourage them to reach out to Latinos in their community. And we've done that in dioceses all across the country, about 15 dioceses. In 2015, there was a resolution 8086, which called for monies for cultural competency training and expanding network for new coaches and a number of other Christian formation and stuff. That resolution asked for $1.5 million to be given to the church, to the office, and the resolution was approved in both houses. However, when the budget came out, there was a zero for that resolution. It was not funded, and thanks to some incredible allies, the next day when the budget was presented, an amendment was made to transfer some undesignated reserves back into the budget so they could fund two resolutions that had not been funded. One was for church planting, and the other was for Latiné Ministry. And so that was approved for $3 million, and the office received $1.3 million for that next training. And again, we did some pretty amazing work during that time. One of those was the Academia Ecuménica de Liderazgo. It was a lay formation program. We trained about 450 people in dioceses all across the church, including Latin America. Every diocese in Latin America had training, and then there were some dioceses in the U.S. In 2016, from funds from that monies, we hired the first Associate Missioner for Latino Ministries, Samuel Borbon, and in 2017, we held the first ELMC, Episcopal Latino Ministry Competency Course, and that came out of, all of this came out directly from the 8086 resolution. So I want to talk about the importance of language. We're aware of the fact that sometimes we need interpretation and translation. I mean, we always need it, but sometimes we need it in gatherings like this. Over the years, there's been a need that we recognized about language that not everybody else sort of recognized or affirmed. And so over the years, there were a number of resolutions at General Convention calling for, beginning in 88, publication of the Constitution in canons in Spanish. Interesting, the first thing that was called for by resolution to be translated. In 2001, there was a study, a resolution calling for a study and a plan regarding translation and interpretation. I'm sorry, that was actually 2002. Executive Council passed a resolution to study and plan regarding translation and interpretation. And I was appointed to that. I was on Executive Council. That committee was, resolution was established, was approved. That committee never met. And so in 2003, through some networking, a resolution was sent to General Convention. No, sorry, I'm messed up my dates. I'm sorry. In 2003, a resolution called for mandated that all official church documents be translated into Spanish and French. That was in 2003. In 2009, a resolution called for a translation of the Episcopal Church's website into Spanish and French. There has been attempts to do that, but that's never been fully translated. Today, of course, we have AI, but it's a different situation. In 2018, A proposed structural process for liturgical translations was established by the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music. And in 2018, an affirmation or reaffirmation of the Church's commitment to providing translation and interpretation services. I served on Executive Council from 2000 to 2005, and it was during that time that that funding was provided for the establishment of a coordinator for translation services. And that's been a really important, I think, a very important piece of this puzzle, because prior to 2000, before 2006, almost every pastoral letter from the bishops, general convention actions, executive council actions were not translated for a very large number of Latinos that were bishops and everybody else who were not able to have access. In 2009, I want to go back real quick to this, and then I'll wrap this up. In 2009, the Episcopal Church's strategic vision of reach Latino Hispanics. I told you that this resolution was approved. 2009, the church experienced a major deficit. We went to General Convention knowing that there was going to be a major deficit of about $5 million. The resolution approving the strategic vision called for $3.3 million to be given to the office so that we could implement the vision. At General Convention in 2009, 55 employees of the Church Center, colleagues of mine, were dismissed when the budget was approved. And in spite of that, they put $330,000 into the budget for this resolution. So I saw that as because it was real advocating for, this resolution. We've approved this resolution, we need to support it. And even though they couldn't give the $303.3 million, they did give 10% of that, which I thought was, and we did a lot with that. Now, there's a lot of ways to see that, but in the way I saw it as a real affirmation of the church wanting to support us. And then in 2015, folks, when that resolution came up, 8086, folks said, "This is our chance, Anthony. We're going to make sure that that we get money so that you can do some of the things that you've been wanting to do for all these years." Now, I need to say that we couldn't have done it without a lot of people, right? All of these years of ministry, bishops, lay people, clergy, talented people from around the church who have believed in this ministry and have supported us. Obviously women, Maria Cueto, her aunt, Virginia Cueto Ram, Carmen Guerrero, an amazing person, Jubilee officer at the Church Center, Miguelina Howe, who's a very proud first Latina dean in the Episcopal Church, Altagracia Perez Bullard, who teaches at BTS, authors like Juan Oliver and Carla Roland Guzman, just amazing, women leaders, musicians like Skinner Chavez Melo, who wrote Misa Xochipilli, and who was one of the editors for Albricias, Julio Cuellar, who you're going to hear in a few minutes, Yuri Rodriguez, who is just an amazing vocalist and musician, and San Montes, who introduced Montaña to the Episcopal Church and has sort of made it just as common as apple pie in terms of our worship. Allies like Susan Snook and Scott Gunn, Frank Logue, and Donald Romanek that I've worked with, and Anglos who have been a part of Latino Hispanic Ministry from the very, very beginning. People like Ted Chase and Jim Hagan, John Cater, Asa Butterfield, and so many others who have been leaders in the church and helped us to get to where we are. And it's my clear conviction that the future of the Episcopal Church, the future of Latino Hispanic ministry will go nowhere without Anglos involved in Latino Hispanic ministry. We have probably less than the number of fingers on my hands in seminary, Latino seminarians. And that's been the case for so many years. We have very few people in seminary. So the people that are being raised up, the people that are feeling God calling them to Latino Hispanic ministry are Anglo clergy. And I am so thankful for them. So the future of Latiné Ministry. You may have noticed that when the Latino Hispanic Ministry began, it was referred to as Hispanic Ministry, which was a very common term at that time. When I came to the church center, I added the word Latino because one, that's the term that I self-identify with, but it was also, I noticed that most Protestant denominations were using Latino instead of Hispanic. In the last few decades ago, as an attempt to be more conscientious and more inclusive about gender, the term Latinx became in vogue and is used in a lot of our academic institutions. However, only about 2 to 4% of Latinos in the U.S. Use that term themselves. And I lately, just in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, the term Latiné has become more common. And one of the things that I'm seeing is that it's not just being used in the U.S., but it's also being used in Latin America. It's a word that we can pronounce. It's a word that we can adapt. One of the things with using gender neutral words, things like todos and toda, and we use todos is the term for all, which is sort of the common word. If we want to be inclusive, we say todos y todas, but it gets repetitive when you do that all the time. And so with using the e, you can say tode and todes, and it's it kind of works. So I kind of see Latiné as a very possible term for Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic ministry in the future. I want to remind you all and the church that the United States of America is either the second or the third largest Latino country in the world, depending on whether you can consider Brazil Latino or not, based on its definition. If Brazil is not a Latino country, then the United States is the second largest Latino country in the world, after Mexico. If you consider Brazil Latino, then the United States is the third largest Latino country in the world. And either way, we are a huge Latino country in the world. And we are growing. The projections by 2060 is that either 1/3 or 1/4 of the United States will be Latino. About 28% by 2060. Okay? That's a lot of people. And of course, we know that we only represent about 4% of the Episcopal Church. I believe that the Latino population is hungry for God, and they're hungry for a worshiping community, and that we have a bright future, but we can't continue to do the things the way we've always done them and expect different results. My hope is that you will join me in doing whatever we can to raise awareness and to leave the doors open for God, where God's Spirit is leading the church. I said at the beginning of my ministry 20 years ago that the future of the church was Latino. Today, I would say that the future of the Episcopal Church is Latino, and it will be multilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, and multi-spirited. It will be full of sabor and fiesta and muchos colores, and it is going to be full of tode and todes. Finally, I want to say a word of thanks. I want to give thanks to my 3 colleagues who helped me assemble the photos I shared in this presentation and helped me with the research. David Limo from Peru, Edgar Giraldo from Colombia, and Adrián Cárdenas from Panama. Muchas gracias a esas 3 personas. And I cannot end without expressing my deepest gratitude to my wife, Guadalupe, who has shared me with the church these last 20 years in my previous position as missionary for Latino Hispanic Ministries. Her belief in me and my ministry has allowed me to travel around the church, where I have learned so much and have been given so many opportunities, and where I have been loved and where I have been able to share Jesus' love.